increase prices, that is in essence a hidden tax. And also, how can we have a free market when the government is dictating the choices we need to make?
Several other questions, but in the meantime, Derek, I think, or Georgia are assembling the audience, questions from the audience. One of my final questions is, poll after poll has shown that the American public holds in low esteem Congress in general, both houses, both parties. Rampant partisanship is on exhibit in Washington, D.C. Mr. Blevins, if you were elected and you're a libertarian, I think, I don't know who you would caucus with. Probably could be with caucus in the phone booth.
You're right.
And Mr. Boccieri, you do caucus with the Democratic Party. In fact, some of your opponents, or one or two of your opponents, have called Nancy Pelosi Democrat. What can you, as individuals, do to try to stem the rampant partisanship in Congress? And will you be beholden to your party more than you would be beholden to the constituents of the 16th Congressional District?
I think we need Congressmen to be beholden to the Constitution. As far as what I would caucus with, I'd probably be the loneliest man in D.C., and I'd be okay with that. Now, as far as working to break down the barriers of partisanship, I obviously, being libertarian in Congress, I would have to work with members from both sides of the aisle to get the legislation introduced through committee and brought to a vote. I'm hoping that once if I were fortunate enough to be elected to Congress, that I would be able to call on some fine individuals. I have a great admiration for Congressman Ron Paul. I like his ideas, I like his philosophies, and I think that if we start working there, that we can then build a coalition of all parties in Congress to get legislation back on track, to get America back on track, to get us following the Constitution once again, and living by that rule of law. Now, speaking to a gentleman the other day about all the minor parties in the race this election season, and I make no bones about it. I think that the greatest day for America is when you go into Congress and there are 435 parties that represent people there. I think that would be your
Thank you, Ron. I have staked out one of the loneliest places in Washington. In the territory I stand on, as evaluated by the National Journal, rates all members of Congress on the bills that they sponsor, that they introduce, they vote on, and the letters that they sign, is right in the middle. In fact, 435 out of 435 members, I've been ranked as 234. And let me tell you, that's a lonely place sometimes. But I believe that we need to make sure that we understand, both Democrats and Republicans alike, and Libertarians and Independents, that while we may be wearing different jerseys, we're playing for America. And we need to if the majority of the Democrats fail to deliver on these issues that are challenging our countries, they're not going to go away. And when we come to the middle and ask Republicans to give us their ideas, like we've done on the debt commission, which was their idea, like we've done with the free market approach to drive innovation technology called cap and trade, or like we've done in the healthcare bill, asking folks to be responsible and when they can afford insurance to buy it so that you all don't have to pay for it if they wind up in an emergency. Those are their ideas, but yet they're voting against them. Something remarkable happened in Washington. I sponsored a bill with a Republican member of Congress that is now law. The president signed it, called the Hire Act, where folks who are hired back, who have been long-term unemployed, those small businesses would get a tax credit for doing this. And when I went to him and said, we're getting our bill passed, and this is great, we can talk about how we're ending the partisanship. He said, I can't support this. And I said, well, why? It's the party, they would kill me if I did this. And look, folks, I have taken votes. I told my party no when they wanted to raise the debt limit. I said no when they wanted to end and put a moratorium on drilling for oil. We need to continue that. I said no when they wanted to raise the federal pay for employees when we didn't have that number. And I said no, most importantly, when they asked me to help bail out Wall Street. So, folks, right in the middle is where Congress and regular and that's where I am as well.
I agree with Congressman. We all do play for America. And the difference is that whereas my Democratic and Republican opponents want to call plays from partisan playbooks, I feel that we need to start calling plays from the playbook written by our founding fathers, and that is the Constitution of the United States of America.
Okay. Do you want to rebut that?
I applaud Mr. Blevin for standing up here today. He's had the courage to stand here, take his positions, and have moderators and, in fact, the public be critical of this. I'm, again, disappointed that my other opponent didn't find this time worthy to be here. I see his campaign workers are here, but they are not standing here to have this evaluation done. Let me just say this, is that the partisanship in our country is a direct result of special influences, special interest groups who are injecting their ideas and their beliefs into our political process. Do Republicans want an energy plan? Yes. Do Democrats want an energy plan? Yes. But why can't we find the middle ground? Because folks like Ralph Regular are being driven out of the Congress. Folks like John Boccieri, if we're not successful in this race, are being driven out of the Congress. Moderates in this country are being driven out by special interest groups who don't want you to have choices, by special interest groups that want to take these referees off the field so that they can continue to make money. This all comes down, my mom said it, she said, Johnny, money makes the world go round sometimes. And believe me, this has been a maturity process for me in Washington because I have seen the direct influence that money can have on our elections. And anytime you take on the big oil interests, the big insurance companies, the big banks on Wall Street, what does that make you? A big target.
We've talked a little bit about Congressman Ralph Reagan, former congressman that represented the 16th district. And we talked about some of the good things that he's done. What did he do or stand for, though, that you would disagree with? Mr. Blevin, up here first.
Again, there have been mentioned the federal funds he's brought into the district. And I just want to reiterate that although that appears great on the surface, the fact of the matter is that we as Americans need to remember that when we are bringing money into our district, it is at the disadvantage to another congressional district somewhere else. What we need to do is, again, measure our accomplishment by the amount of our money that they keep in our district to be the fiscal responsibility and tax cuts in Washington.
Let me just say that I agree with Congressman Regular on these points. I think that we need to have trade agreements that are fair to American workers and American businesses. I agree with Congressman Regular that Democrats and Republicans need to work together to do this. Where I would disagree with Congressman Regular is funding these unregulated and unchecked positions on Wall Street that have allowed our economy to fall into this great ditch that we find ourselves. These financial bubbles that have been created because we've taken referees off the field could have been avoided if we would have only funded the referees and make sure they knew clearly on Wall Street who was wearing the stripes. I would also disagree that we need to hand out tax breaks to the wealthiest among us. Look, our consumption is driven by the middle class, and they've been shrinking over the last 10 years. We've seen just in the last decade, since 2000, we have lost 5 million jobs, 5 million manufacturing jobs, 2.5 million jobs have been to China alone. So granting countries like China and its favored trading nation status, and granting them, not giving the president the tools to make sure that they allow their currency to free float and ending these trade deficits, I think is a big problem to Congressional Republicans. Because we know that when we build it, grow it, and assemble it here in our country, that makes our economy much stronger.
This question comes from the audience, and in fact, I'm going to compliment the audience on having some very good questions here. This goes to you first, Mr. Boccieri. Will you support funding for international family planning programs that include contraceptives?
I think, look, we need to take care of Americans first. We need to invest in our families here at home. Right. Give all families the tools to make their decisions themselves. And if we have resources left over, then we need to listen to the Bible, because it says, to whom much is given, much is expected. And I just think that once we take care of our families and give them the resources they need to make decisions about how many children they have. And, I've been blessed that my wife was actually due here in just 3 weeks today. Yeah. Those resources need to stay at home first, and then if we have resources left over, we can help the rest of the family.
On this particular issue, I feel that we should be taking care of America first. I do not support sending American tax dollars to foreign countries to help their citizens. We have enough issues here that we have to face as a nation. We've got a lot of problems here that can be rectified by allowing people to pour their money instead of taking the hard-earned money of the American working class and sending it across seas. Makes no sense to me.
Okay. This is also a question from the audience. How do you expect the new health care bill to affect nurses in terms of jobs and pay? And this is from a University of Akron graduate in the nursing program.
In the healthcare legislation, there were provisions that provided tax incentives so that we could help get more physicians, more nurses, more primary care, healthcare workers out of the workforce. We're going to have a nursing crisis here down the line. In the state legislature, I supported legislation that would give tax breaks to folks who had big education loans, who took out loans so that they could be forgiven if they went into primary care and bedside care. We need to make sure that those healthcare workers have the resources they need to go to school, to graduate and get out there and help us with this dilemma that we're facing. Let me just say this, too, is that when we put more money into those fields, more money into those training programs, by holding insurance companies responsible and capping the amount that they can use for their administrative costs, I'll have you know that just while we've been discussing and debating health care reform, the insurance companies have increased their profits since 2009 by 26%. Under the provisions of this bill, 85% of the money that you all pay in premiums now has to go back to doctors and nurses and to patients. And 15% is the maximum amount that they can use for their overhead costs. Because the federal government, when it administers Medicare, has a 3 to 5% overhead cost. But 15% in the insurance industry by the time they pay the CEOs or preferred stockholders, and then if there's money left over, it goes into funding workers, patients and nurses and primary care physicians. So the health care bill actually is going to help increase the number